Okay. So welcome. So I have just a couple of things that I'd like to go through with you guys. I'm Matt Wright. I created this program with Alvandru, who's also here, and others, of course, who helped us out a great deal. But in terms of the substance, we're the ones who are running it. So I'm glad to have you guys here. And what we want to do is we want to just talk to you a little bit about this program um, and what it's about and what you can expect to get out of it. And then we'd like to answer your questions also. So yeah, and if you have any questions or anything like that, you can just raise a hand and we'll get to you, no problem. So just to start, again, welcome to this. This is our micro-credential and applied survey research. It's the first time we've ever done this, so it's brand new. We're really excited about it. Um, so a lot of like what we're going to be learning as well as teaching in this. So but really what we want to do is we want to focus on the practice of attitudinal survey research, which you'll often see referred to as polling or public opinion polling. The question, why should we do this? Well, there's never been more interest in learning people's opinions. Campaigns and news media are always using polls to tell us who leads whom in elections, what the public wants, how well or how poorly people think things are going, and so on, right? So we're surrounded by polls all the time. And so it's a nice time to sort of think about how can we learn how to use those polls better. Also, governments and organizations have been incredibly proactive about using surveys to poll citizens or consumers or their own employees about attitudes of various kinds. So polls like that are all around. And researchers in all fields use polls to capture people's subjective experiences, and the list goes on and on. So what we want to do in this course is a couple things. We want to offer an experiential education about pretty much every aspect of the survey research process. So that includes how to effectively design survey questions and question sequences, how to recruit participants, and the various strengths and weaknesses of different sampling methods that we could use, how to do analysis based on some streamlined statistical ideas. So things like margin of error and statistical uncertainty and such. Lastly, how to communicate survey data to different audiences. So ultimately, we're going to talk about how to do all those kinds of things. And you are going to, in this class, if you take it, design in conjunction with the others who are taking it, and Andrew and I, a survey that's going to go out to a nationally representative sample of Canadians. You're going to design the questions that you include in the survey, and you're going to get to analyze and present the results. So that's the upshot, and that's going to be all as a part of this course. So, who do we think is going to benefit from this? Well, mainly we intend it to be of use to anyone who works on political campaigns, journalists who cover politics and political campaigns and such, those who work for or want to work for any number of the growing number of companies that does public opinion research in Canada, people who do market research as part of their jobs, people who spend at least some of their time capturing sentiment within organizations, so people who run, organizational focus groups and workplace climate surveys and things like that. And so what we want to do is we want to empower people, anyone who takes the course, to generate quality, bespoke survey data and surveys much more cheaply than they could do and better than they could do if they, farmed it out to a company to do it for them. It's also going to allow people to better understand the survey research that they encounter, either journalistically or in their day-to-day lives. So that's what we hope to do. As I mentioned before, I'm Matt Wright. You can reach me at this email if you have any questions. I'm one of the instructors. I study attitudes about immigration, national identity, and political values. I use surveys almost exclusively in my research. I've done many, many surveys and published findings and so on. So I have a lot of experience. I teach courses on political psychology and other things. I also teach a grad seminar at UBC in political science on survey research methods. So I have some experience with this topic that I hope to share. And the other is Andrew, Andrew, sorry, I forgot to put in your email address. So I guess he'll be emailing me. I'm going to put that in later. Andrew is also an associate professor in the department and studies policymaking in Canada and teaches courses on political behavior, and also has a great deal of experience teaching both grad and undergrad classes on methodology and statistics. So you're in great hands, I'd like to think. I'd like to turn for a second to what kind of style of instruction we're thinking about carrying out here and what your level of commitment, if you take the class, is going to be. So we envisage a 10 or 11 week commitment in total. That is assuming maybe 4 to 5 hours a week on the high side, probably less than that on most weeks for the first 8 weeks. So for the first 8 weeks, you're going to be primarily online and you're going to be doing online modules at your own pace. You're going to progress through and you're going to do some quizzes at the end of everything, and there's going to be a couple of homework assignments, but basically you're going to take 2 weeks to do 8 to 10 hours worth of work by our estimate. So you're going to do about one module out of four over for every 2 weeks, and we're expecting it's something like 4 to 5 weeks, like I say, on the high side. In those weeks, there's going to be 1 hour per week of scheduled drop-in office hours with either me or Andrew, would probably me, by Zoom. I'll just be there. You can show up, you can ask questions, and we can just, talk about material, whatever you want to do. And that's going to be mainly the schedule, and you're going to hand in homework assignments. I think 3 homework assignments is what we have on the docket right now. So for the last 2 to 3 weeks, we're going to have a couple of meetings a week. Presently, I've scheduled them Tuesdays and Thursdays, 6 to 7, although that's not set in stone. But certainly twice a week for about an hour. And at that point, we're going to meet online live, and we are going to coordinate on the survey that we're going to develop. So that's going to be mainly about discussions about what you want to do, what you want to ask, how you're going to ask it, how it all fits together. And then we're going to program the survey and we're going to put it up. And then the survey is going to go out, it's going to get fielded, and we will get the results and I will distribute them to you, and then you will analyze them. So the point is, we're going to create a survey together. We're going to field it to a nationally representative sample of Canadians, and you will ask whatever you want, and you're going to have an opportunity at the end of that to present an analysis of your own survey items. So whatever you want to tell us about what it is that you wanted to that you want to see. So so let me just talk for a second about course requirements. And mainly just a couple of things that occurred to me when I was thinking about like what would I want you guys to think about in this, whether you were deciding to take this class or not. So I'd keep the following in mind. First, the course has no prerequisites whatsoever. It's designed to be understood and taken and to give benefit to anyone who would be in a position to take it. So it's not technically complicated. It's an introductory deal. So you should not worry that you've not taken whatever, advanced statistical methods or whatever. That shouldn't be a problem. Um, Related to that, while we deal with some statistical concepts, mostly informally, you don't have to be familiar with statistics or heavy math or anything like that. So we're making it as accessible and as informal as possible, while at the same time trying to give you the gist of like what statisticians do when they handle survey info, or what researchers do when they handle survey information. We may add a few short readings here or there to augment a point in the modules. But generally speaking, the reading load is quite minimal. We're sort of designing this class not to be a heavy reading class. It's mostly just learn by reading the material and then interacting with me or Andrew and then like doing the survey project. It's mainly that's what it's targeted to. When we were designing the course, we were mostly thinking about maximizing flexibility, which is why it's a kind of an at your own pace deal for the first, big chunk of it. And then after that, we wanted to provide a lot of live interaction with instructors and all of that. So you're going to be getting feedback throughout the course, mainly on your homework assignments at first and office hours for the first little while, and then we'll have kind of an intense boot campy kind of like session, a couple of sessions in the last couple of weeks to get our survey off the ground. So, so that's, what we require. In terms of what you'd expect, as far as assessment goes, I'd mention a couple things. Mainly, you're going to be assessed in this micro-credential as a function of a couple of different things. First, there's going to be assessment quizzes, which are going to be multiple choice quizzes. They're going to be at the end of every module. They're going to be 4 total, and they're going to be sort of auto-graded, and mainly just to check to make sure you're picking up on the material that we're trying to get across. And you're going to have to pass all of the quizzes to advance to the next project. We're not like grading them necessarily, just kind of like pass fail. And you'll be able to go back and, retake and all that, of course. We're going to have three very short homework assignments, one at the tail end of every of modules 2, 3, and 4. And it's going to be mainly just short answer questions, maybe a couple of little exercises, things like that. And those are going to be graded by either myself or Andrew with comments. So you're going to have some feedback there, and an ability to see if you're really grasping the material, and if you're not, then we can proceed from there. And you have to get through all the homeworks and pass them all in order to advance to the survey project. Lastly, I mentioned this already, but we're doing at the end, we're going to do a survey analysis, and we're going to create this jointly. And either I or Andrew, whoever's teaching the class down the road, is going to be, actively involved in that. It's going to include building the thing in software, consulting individually and as a group with what we want to do, what the best order of questions would be, what are the specific questions, and so on and so forth. And then we're going to run the survey. I am going to distribute the data, and you're going to analyze it, like I said. So those are all my preset points. I want to invite either Aideen Cleary, who's here as one of the people that actually makes this class happen on the technical side, and Andrew Owen, my co-instructor, who's here to weigh in with whatever points they wanted to make also. But then I'd like to just throw it open and see if you guys had any questions that we could answer. So I don't know, Aideen, do you have anything you wanted to add in?
No, as I mentioned to you today, I'm here to learn. Thank you. It's really interesting.
Uh,
Um, I think I want to take the course, Matthew.
I
And
highly
then
encourage you to take it. It's going to be
yeah, yeah. It sounds very interesting. And I also like the fact that it sounds really accessible, and you're also taking so much into consideration for the people that are your learners, that they're busy, they've got a lot going on with work and family and a lot of other things. So you can see that you've really taken that into consideration as well. So I'm simply here if anybody has any question that around what we in learning handle for you that you may not be aware of that. So I'll chime in if any such question comes up, Matthew.
great. Thanks very much. I'm not going to put Andrew on the spot, but if he wants to weigh in on any of this, he can feel free to
Yeah,
do that.
I have I think two or three thoughts. The
Sure.
first is Matt is being pretty modest. He's like one of the top researchers within North America on public opinion and immigration,
Read by
and
dummies.
probably one of the top survey researchers in all of Canada. So he's doesn't just happen to teach stuff and research it. The second thing is that the thing that I think is really cool about the course is the doing of the survey. Um, you learn so much more about these ideas of question wording and question ordering. And does this question really tap into what we want when you're forced to actually make these choices and then put them out into the world for people to respond to? You also learn by making mistakes. So you get the data back and you realize, oh, I guess they could have thought of it this way or that way. So I think that's a really cool element of the course. And also, I think, like, if you're here, you're probably curious, but there's a lot to making surveys that are really good. And I see headlines with surveys all the time, and usually good journalists link you to the original survey methodology and the full results and stuff. And you can see that some of these are really problematic. Like the questions are leading, or there's questions that follow a series of questions that kind of skew the key question that's like the top line result. And so if you take this course, I think you'll be much more capable of thinking critically and like questioning survey results that you get, which I think in a lot of at least professional settings can be really good because it's sometimes the case that people see data and they're like, well, it's data, it must be right. Um, and I really believe in survey research as like a really effective way to understand public opinion or workplace opinion or whatever, but you have to know the art and science of it to be able to figure out whether this was done well or not. I'll stop there.
Thanks a lot, Andrew. Appreciate it. All right. So I'm happy to just throw it open to any of you guys. If you have questions, feel free to just chime in. There's not too many people in the thing, so it shouldn't be unwieldy, but like, so feel free to just go ahead, and we'll just stand by and answer.
And questions in the chat would be good too, right?
Sure. If I can find a way to open it. Yeah, here it is. I haven't been on Zoom in a while. Yeah, feel free to drop them in the chat too, or just speak up.
Hey, I have a question.
Sure.
Thanks for the overview. So I know you mentioned like talking about analyzing the data and not necessarily getting too deep into statistics. But I'm curious, like with the additional readings, will some of those be around, I might have missed it, but around like more in-depth, like technical analysis because I'm personally curious in that piece as well, like telling them or like going a little bit deeper into the analysis of the data. So I was just curious on that.
So I feel like we're gonna see where people are at when we get into the class, and I feel
Okay.
like I would be very happy to sort of like help people who are interested in diving deeper into particular topics, sort of find areas. There's a lot of stuff where we've kind of had to streamline and simplify and whatever. So like my answer at this point would be like I'd be thrilled to sort of say, oh, this, you want to learn more about this topic or this particular aspect, go look at this, this, and this. Our concern is
Hmm.
always like, we don't want to ask people from the jump to commit to 15
Yeah.
hours a week of stuff because everybody's got busy lives and whatever. So,
Yeah.
but if people have time to look into things and they say, oh, this is really interesting.
Hmm.
I've had a lot of practice dealing with students who want to go down various rabbit holes on these topics. So I think I would welcome that. Honestly, it would be kind of a fun thing. So
Okay.
I mean, do we want more? I'm not gonna. It doesn't mean I'm gonna start like assigning readings to everything, but like it's much easier sometimes to demonstrate things with examples.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we're gonna try to find and feel out, and especially in this go, is like at what level, at what level do we converse about the material and about the technology that we're engaging in?
Hmm.
So I'm totally open to conversations about that.
Okay.
There's a couple of questions in the chat. Do I know the program dates yet? So we were just talking, thank you, Alex. We were just talking about pushing it back. So I think we're starting now. Aideen, I don't know, did Alan say, like, I think like later, it was originally going to be third week of February that we were going to start, and then I think now we're probably going to push it back maybe a couple weeks or something, but we don't have anything definitive on that yet. Um,
It's confirmed on our website,
yeah.
a start date of February 17th.
Oh, February.
Now,
Okay.
as I mentioned today with with your live session starting a bit later, we may
Yeah.
be able to leave the registration open. But
Okay.
what I'll do is I'll pop the link to the registration page in the chat here for people to go and take a look. But it's February 17th, is when the shell should open up with access to the materials.
Sure. Sandra's asking what impact AI has on survey questions. I expect more than before. I haven't encountered. So I wonder if people are using AI to write questions. I suspect people like the way that AI bleeds into this kind of stuff is that it starts off with people who want to run surveys in different languages. And so a colleague of mine and I just fielded a survey in 8 countries, and we made the choice of not using AI to translate and or like Google Translate, which is all based on large language models anyway, right? It's all kind of all part of the same family of apps basically. So we thought about it because to do all the translations was going to be, I think, $10,000 or something, and we're like, okay, well, do we want to spend $10,000 or should we just let Google Translate handle it? And it turns out, like, I speak English and French, so I was looking at the Google Translate English to French and French to English, and I was like, this is pretty good. Like it was pretty good. It was not perfect, but I was like, okay, this is impressive. So that's how it's intersected with my research a little bit, but we didn't use it this time. And we ran a subsequent survey where we were just kind of toying with it a little bit. So that's where I've seen it sort of happen, where people have started using AI. But you could certainly say you could ask ChatGPT, write me a survey question on this topic, and it would probably be able to do it. But I mean, generally speaking, we're not going to talk too much about that because we want to learn how to write our own questions, for the most part. Um, yeah,
Can I just add on to that, Matt?
sure.
So there is actually some people proposing, and again, this is an academic point, but there's some people proposing instead of surveying people, you can survey AI and somehow get a representative sample. I think I can guess that Matt's opinion is the same as mine, which we think that's bananas. Um, so I wouldn't be too worried about that. But another thing that comes up in this is if you use sources of respondents where they're paid very little or the incentives are very low, there is some concern that they might be using AI to answer the survey.
Yeah.
And this is the sort of thing that we talk about, not explicitly in depth about preventing AI bots being your survey respondents, but like these types of ideas of careful sampling and assessing whether people respond to the survey just way too quickly, which is would be either a signal that they're just skipping through it and they're not trying hard, or that they're like I wouldn't even know how to do it, but I could imagine somehow. I don't know why you would ask the computer to state your opinion rather than saying your opinion, but those are the sorts of like innovations that I think are worth thinking about. And just to Emily's point, I just want to echo what Matt said is like we this is our what we do, right? Survey research is what we do. So if anyone's interested in going beyond the course, we have at our fingertips lots of uh, suggestions and references and ideas. It's hard to know exactly what you mean by more detailed analysis because at this point, everyone on the Zoom doesn't have the same language and stuff. But I would say that if you see like a result from a survey company on their website after you complete this, you'd be able to understand it completely. Uh, Going beyond that to the next level, where you might use fancier techniques like regression to assess relationships, that's something we could definitely give you additional reading on or direct you and help you figure out a way to develop your skills there.
Yeah, just to add on to what Andrew was saying there about like specious survey respondents. Didn't occur to me, but like yeah, that would definitely be a thing that you could see people doing because people make money taking surveys, right? So if you could program a bot to go and write 1,000 surveys for you, but part of what we do that does fit into the context of what we're doing, because part of what we do is we talk about a lot of the things that Andrew mentioned, right? So like why people, not that people are lazy necessarily, but that they don't want to do more work than they have to do. Even if they agree to do a survey, they're not going to spend 20 minutes on it when they could do it in five. So as a means of speeding up and making things easier for people cognitively, they take all kinds of shortcuts, and this would sort of fit into that. Tammy's asking, will we touch on intercept surveys or single question surveys in the course? We will, although only briefly, because that's not really super what we're thinking about. But yeah, we could talk about that for sure. And this falls into another like we are. I mean, this is an interesting time for us, right? Because we're trying to figure out. Well, we have an idea of who's going to benefit from this and like how they're going to benefit from it. But like we're listening as much as we're trying to make those decisions about like, well, what are people going to, if we sit and we say, okay, well, here are the topics that we think people need to know. There's all kinds of like there are all kinds of things like that, like okay, well, how do you get a good intercept sample, right? That's an interesting kind of little subtopic that fits under the broader conversation of sampling, but like we hadn't, planned a conversation about it, but we could definitely have a conversation about it if people are interested in that. So yeah, I mean, like there's all kinds of like weird and cool and exotic like sampling methods that people use on the internet that you can think about the pros and cons. I mean, intercept sampling definitely fits into we talk about a simplified version of the sort of total survey error approach, right? So we can think about, well, what's the quality of the data? Where are the biases that are coming from the intercept sample that we've chosen? So that definitely like it's amenable to that perspective, even if we hadn't planned on talking about it, but we can definitely work it in. Yeah, anybody else? Chat works too, or just speak up. No problem either way.
Well, just because I can't resist, I Googled survey in Google News and then put a Canadian filter on it. Um, and this is shocking. Fewer cats in Quebec households survey. So the number of one cat households is stable over time. The number of two and more cat households seems to be declining. I'm not sure that's the best use of the survey research methodology, but it is a news story.
What was the question?
Oh yeah, fair enough. I haven't got that far.
It was a feeling thermometer about cat ownership. Look, like I said in the beginning, there are surveys constantly flying around about every conceivable topic. I almost brought it. I couldn't find the slide in time, but I almost brought the one about Andrew knows which one I'm talking about, right? The one about like the animals that people could fight and like which animals they think they could beat versus not. It was kind of like, so I mean, like all those kinds of surveys are fun. I also don't, we should say, like, we have no sense, based on you guys coming to us, we have no sense of like what kinds of questions people are even going to want to ask, right? I mean, like, if they're going to do a survey of Canadians, like, well, what do you want to ask people? Doesn't have to be, I mean, Andrew and I are political scientists, right? But it doesn't have to be political questions. It could be it could be anything, within reason. So that'll be interesting to see, well, what do people want to know? Yeah, Aideen, go ahead.
Just a quick question to our prospective learners here. I'm just really curious, what industry are they working in? If they don't mind adding that into the chat, that would be interesting.
Aideen's doing a little surveying of her own before we even take the
Oh, there you go.
class. Research, excellent. Higher education, user research. Excellent. Oh, that's very cool. So it'd be useful for us to know at this point. I mean, you guys have been doing this for a while, or you guys have been asking questions and stuff, but like, is there anything that we can do for you or like include in part of this that would benefit you or make you more likely to take this? Because like we have a course and we're ready to go and all of that, but like I said, we're kind of in listening mode at this point. We don't have a dogma about what this is and about what we cover and what we don't cover.
I think personally for me, and kind of echo what Tammy was saying, because we actually used to work together. So we I think are kind of interested in similar things coming out of this course. But because in tech we often, I mean, I'm sure this also happens maybe in academia as well, but like needing to make trade-offs in research and like what those trade-offs are and understanding the risks of certain trade-offs and survey research specifically would be helpful to understand. Um, because we don't always have the luxury of like a longer period of time to do research, and so making the case for maybe like I've really pushed in my company to do like cognitive interviewing on the survey questions to actually make sure that we like know like how people are interpreting the questions, but there isn't always time for that. It's like even understanding like what's the risk of not doing that, or if we have 5 questions versus like 2, to Tammy's point of like intercept surveys being shorter, what data are we then losing out on to maybe make like to like look at the correlation between certain questions or like segments.
Yeah,
So,
I mean that's all,
well,
so there's a lot, I mean there's a lot to work with there, right? And it all fits into everything that we talk about because it's all trade-offs. And the other thing that occurs to me in response to that is that like we're in a world where it's sort of cheaper and easier to do this kind of thing than it ever has been.
mhm,
And it's like, despite that, there's still costs associated. There's still, as you say, there's trade-offs, there's time limits, but like, there's so many people running surveys without any real willingness or ability to put thought into what they're doing and whether the data that's coming back.
mhm.
I had a prof years ago who's like everything, it would just be garbage in, garbage out. That's what she would say about everything, right? It's like, yeah, if you ask people dumb questions, expect dumb answers, like so. And so people know that. I mean, look, people
Yeah.
don't. I have professional. Nobody in this room or anywhere. Nobody at UBC, but I have professional colleagues who've written some of the most incredibly bizarre survey questions I've ever seen, and just sort of not thinking. And sometimes it's as much as like sometimes it comes from something as simple as like having a journalist background, like a journalistic background, instead of having a sort of survey research background or a social scientific background. It utterly changes the way. And like an example would be just off the top of my head is that people who have kind of like journalistic experience and journalistic background are very willing to ask people questions directly about causality. Why did you vote for this candidate? Why do you prefer this product? Why do what why do you like whatever, right? And we know from survey from like 100 years of looking at how people answer surveys that you can't ask people why they did something. You get dross when you ask people why they did something, or at least not. You don't get I should be nicer. You don't get a straightforward answer about why they did something or why they plan to do something. You have to probe it in a somewhat different way, which is, what you're suggesting when you're talking about correlation in future, like fewer questions or more and all of that. There's
Mhm.
one other thing I would say, which is that it's become easier. We don't have this plan, but I anticipate if a lot of you guys have research backgrounds, we might go in this direction a little bit more. um, is to sort of think about issues of causality, in terms of like it could be if you guys are researching product choices or if you're researching, whatever workplace climate or political attitudes or whatever. A lot of what Andrew and I have to do is, when we write stuff up, is not just say, okay, well, what do people think descriptively, right? But think, okay, well, if they choose this over this, or they have this attitude over this attitude, then why is that the case? Which is sometimes more useful to understand rather than what choices they pick. And so that's another direction that we can kind of expand this, and we can build in experiments into our surveys. There's really no limit to what we can do. A lot of it depends on what you guys are bringing to the table in terms of what you want to do and what your level of knowledge is and what your ambitions are. But there's a lot we can do on that front. Tammy's asking, what would be useful for me is not just how to create and execute a good survey, but how to combine insights with other data I'm leveraging. See, that's interesting. That's something that we often struggle with, and I'm a bit of a in the past I've been guilty of being a bit of a survey chauvinist, and not thought too much about other bits of evidence. But yeah, I think that kind of triangulation is super useful. And so there I would sort of thinking about, yeah, in-depth interviews, market research focus groups, things like that. We can talk about how to meld those into surveys. Typically, the way, I mean, you could think about how you would sequence things like that, right? Like colleagues of mine, when they've done this sort of thing, they've gone on a trajectory from like in-depth interviews to serve concept development, and then gone to, focus groups and small group conversations, and then like piloting a larger survey and then doing a full, sort of thing. But it doesn't need to be that. But I mean, like, there's ways in which you can make these findings talk to each other, not only in terms of the finding, but also in terms of like how you develop concepts, how you develop questions. A lot of the time, I mean, speaking of questions that don't make any sense, right? I mean, you ask somebody a really bad or a double-barreled question or something, you might not even realize it yourself as a researcher, and it's only, in a focus group or in an in-depth interview or a friend of yours that you say, "Hey, can you do this survey for me and see if it makes any sense?" That they're like, "I this question is no good." So we will talk about that. And one of the pieces of advice that I always give when we do an actual real life survey, is to always include a lot of opportunities for respondents to provide feedback, and like open-ended feedback. And some of the funnest parts of running surveys is reading the feedback that people have in response to the survey that they've just taken. And you often learn a lot about what they thought was an interesting question, or what they thought was fair or unfair, or if they want to elaborate on things or whatever. So that's a big part of what we're going to be doing. Does anybody else have any questions or comments or thoughts?
Um, I'm sorry, I have another question.
Oh, no worries.
Yeah, this is really helpful. And I feel like, yeah, I'm excited by the prospect of, the content being flexible, given that the lessons are like pre-recorded. How will that content be adjusted depending on student interest?
I think that we're going to have conversations with the students that take the class by email. So if we like, I'm slated to instruct it the first time, I think, like mostly, although you'll be seeing a lot of Andrew. So I think the way I think about it, it's that those modules are the backbone. They're the things that we think everybody needs to know.
Okay.
And my sort of door, as it were, is open to like having conversations with people about what more they want to know, what more they want to read. And it's like I don't want to say it's more interesting for me, right? But it's a different kind of challenge for me, right? Because then I get to think about, okay, well, how can I benefit people who are trying to do a little bit more out of this, or trying to go a little bit more in this direction? So I would anticipate having, students such as yourself that have particular ambitions, that are not sort of like covered in the kind of bread and butter stuff, to, be in touch with me by email and then in office hours for sure. And then we could talk, and then I can like, I don't want to say assign, right? But I could like provide more material, provide more feedback. Students can bring me stuff to look at, to consider. I'm totally open to all that. I mean, I want this to be fun and interesting for you guys, and I want it to be useful, but I also want it to be fun and interesting for me. So like, that's something I'm hoping will happen. We'll see, but I'm definitely open to it.
Cool, thank you.
Sure. I also think, by the way, like the really fun part of this to me is like the last couple of weeks where we're like talking about like building a project. I mean, I think there's limited. We try to make the videos and the reading as fun and interesting as possible, right? But like that kind of stuff is not. It's important. It has to be there, but like really the fun part of those classes is towards the end.